A new documentary called The Pilgrims is out, and it tells the true story of the Pilgrims and how God brought them through some very difficult times to found our nation. Jerry Newcomb, who produced the movie, is here with us, and he joins us now to tell us more about it. Jerry, tell us about Providence Forum and your inspiration for creating this new documentary on the Pilgrims.
Well, Providence Forum is a division of D. James Kennedy Ministries. It was actually originally founded by Dr. Peter Lillback, and he gave it to the ministry. And Dr. Lillback and I wrote a book together on the big, thick book on the faith of George Washington. But this movie is all about the Pilgrims, and it aims to tell the true story and all the difficulties that they faced. And what we did was we relied heavily on original resource sources and original research, so we make sure we were totally accurate in what we told, and a lot of amazing things about the Pilgrims.
What surprised you the most as you learned about them?
I think the fact that 95% of the Indians in the area where they settled had been wiped out in a plague 3 years before the voyage of the Mayflower. And in the providence of God, they came there, and so they were not wiped out by unfriendly Indians. And instead, they were able to meet friendly Indians, and together they made a treaty of peace, and together they enjoyed fellowship as they celebrated the first Thanksgiving, which was 400 years ago, from this very autumn, 400 years ago. And they sat down and they enjoyed a time of worshiping God and 3 days of fun and games and great food.
Tell us about the faith of the Pilgrims.
Well, the faith was the whole motivator. They just wanted to worship Jesus Christ in the purity of the gospel. When they read the Bible for themselves, they felt that the Church of England, this is going back 15 years before, was not really living up to what the Bible says. So they ended up basically getting out of England so they could be at least tolerated in Holland. And then they wanted to be totally free once they heard about Jamestown and that was a permanent establishment. That's where they set out to go, just so they could worship Jesus in the purity of the gospel. And because they were blown off course, they ended up making an agreement for self-government under God, a written charter based on the biblical concept of covenant. It's called the Mayflower Compact, and it was the first major step towards the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution 150 years later.
How much of the Pilgrims' faith is being taught in schools today?
Very little. Very little. And it's really a shame, because that's what motivated them. If you take away the Bible, you take away the Pilgrims. You take away their motivation for coming and to endure all the difficulties that they had to go through in order to be able to worship the Lord in the purity of conscience. And so it was a Bible-centered commonwealth. They even said, for example, in the Mayflower Compact, we, having undertaken a voyage for the glory of God and the advancements of the Christian faith.
What do you hope folks take away from your documentary?
The truth and the full picture of things. I think, unfortunately, what's happened is some people even today are calling for an abolition of Thanksgiving. And I think this is a tremendous tradition, Thanksgiving is. And it's not correct that the Pilgrims, as some people have said, they were bad to the Indians. No, the Pilgrims were great with the Indians. In fact, if other settlers after the Pilgrims had been like them when it came to their relationship with the Indians, it would have been a better history. But as far as the Pilgrims are concerned, they had a good Christian witness. But I want people to realize what they sacrificed and how much they contributed to America. I don't know if you know this, Mark, but they even experimented with socialism, which was imposed upon them by the people who lent them the money. And after a couple of years, they said, no, this is not working. And so Governor Bradford said, wow, we've got to get rid of this. And then he had individual land ownership, and then the prosperity started to come.
What do you think the Pilgrims would think about challenges to religious freedom today?
I think they would be aghast. One of the guests in our program, and by the way, we have Dennis Prager, Bill Federer, Alveda King. But one of our guests is a direct Pilgrim descendant. In fact, his great, going way back, was William Brewster, who was the de facto pastor of the Pilgrims. And this gentleman, William Wrestling Brewster, a contemporary, he said in our film, he said, suppose one of the children of the Pilgrims were to say, do I have to go to church? He said, could you imagine what it would be like if one of the Pilgrims were asked that question? And they might say, listen, you don't realize all the things we went through and all that we suffered through so that you can go to church. It's a great privilege for us to have religious freedom and freedom of conscience, and we need to protect that. And even the founders, jumping ahead 150 years later, they talk about the importance of the freedom of conscience. Frankly, religious freedom is what America is all about. In fact, when the founders gave us the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, the very first freedom mentioned, the first liberty, is freedom of religion.
Quickly, how can folks get a copy or watch the documentary, The Pilgrims?
Well, what we're doing is we're making providenceforum.org, the first post on providenceforum.org, and you can see all the information, including ways in which you could stream it through salemnow.com. But providenceforum.org is the main means by which people can get information on how they can get the video or how they can stream it and so forth.
Okay, Jerry Newcomb with American Foundation Films and the producer of The Pilgrims. Thanks for your work, sir. Blessings to you and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. You too, Mark.